Jake Mitchell had seen a lot in his 15 years hauling cargo across the outer rim, but he wasn't prepared for what waited at Station Kepler that cold morning. His freighter, the Rusty Dawn, needed fuel and basic supplies. Nothing fancy. Just enough to make the next jump back to Earth where his daughter waited with his mom. Station Kepler wasn't the kind of place you'd want to raise kids. It hung in the darkness between systems, a massive ring of metal and rust where humans mixed with a dozen alien species. Most came for trade. Some came to disappear. Jake kept his head down and his business clean. The lower market level was worse than usual that day. Crowds pushed past him as he made his way through the dim corridors. The air recyclers couldn't keep up with the smell of fried food, engine grease, and something sweet that the Valorians sold from their corner stalls. Jake had his shopping list memorized. Protein packs, water filters, and if he had credits left over, maybe some of those chocolate bars his daughter loved. That's when he saw her. Behind a stack of cargo containers near the east dock, a small shape caught his eye. At first he thought it was just trash or abandoned gear. But then it moved. Jake stopped walking. His hand instinctively went to the stunner on his belt, then relaxed when he realized what he was looking at. A kid. A small alien kid, curled up between two shipping crates like she was trying to become invisible. She was Valerian, that much was clear. Their kind had those distinctive scales that caught light even in the darkest corners. Hers shimmered a soft blue color, like ocean water back on Earth. But something was wrong. Her clothes were shredded and dirty, though Jake could tell they'd been expensive once. Real fabric, not the synthetic stuff most people wore out here. Their eyes met for just a second. Jake had 2 kids of his own back home, well, one now since his son was grown, and he knew that look. Pure, absolute terror. This girl expected him to hurt her. Every instinct told him to keep walking. Station security didn't like people poking into other people's business. Whatever situation this kid was in, it wasn't his problem. He had his own family to think about. His own bills to pay. But then the girl's stomach growled loud enough for him to hear it across the distance between them. Jake cursed under his breath. He slowly reached into his jacket pocket, moving carefully so he wouldn't spook her. His fingers found one of the protein bars he always carried. He pulled it out, held it where she could see it, then gently set it on the ground between them before backing up a few steps. The girl stared at the bar. Then at him. Then back at the bar. Her small hand shot out like lightning, grabbed it and retreated back to her hiding spot. She tore into the wrapper with shaking fingers and ate like she hadn't seen food in days. Jake waited. He counted to 30 in his head, giving her time. When she'd finished eating, he crouched down to her level, still keeping his distance. "You lost?" he asked, keeping his voice soft and low. The girl nodded. Just a tiny movement of her head. "Where's your family?" She shook her head this time. Tears were starting to form in those strange triple-pupiled eyes that Valorians had. Jake's mind raced. Station Kepler had a reputation. Kids who ended up alone here didn't stay alone for long. The black market traders who worked the lower levels would snatch her up within hours. Best case, she'd be sold as cheap labor to some mining operation. Worst case. Jake didn't want to think about worst case. He thought about his own daughter, safe at home with grandma. What would he want someone to do if she was lost and scared in a place like this? The decision made itself. "Okay," Jake said, standing slowly. "I've got a ship not far from here. It's safe. Warm. Got more food too. You can stay there tonight and tomorrow we'll figure out where you belong. Sound good?" The girl looked up at him with those huge, frightened eyes. She was so small. Maybe 7 or 8 years old, though Jake wasn't sure how Valerian aging worked. After a long moment, she nodded again and slowly stood up. Jake offered his hand. She hesitated for several heartbeats before her small 3-fingered hand slipped into his. Her skin was cool and smooth, like touching polished stone. He led her through the station using the maintenance corridors he'd learned over years of docking here. These passages were quieter, darker, and most importantly didn't have security cameras. Station authorities asked too many questions, and Jake had a feeling those questions wouldn't help this kid. The Rusty Dawn looked even more beaten up than usual when they arrived at Dock 17. Jake had been meaning to repaint her for about 5 years now. The hull was scarred from micrometeorite impacts, and one of the landing struts had a permanent wobble. But she was paid for, she ran well enough and she was home. He got the girl inside and sealed the airlock behind them. The ship's interior wasn't fancy, but it was clean. Jake kept it that way. The main cabin had sleeping bunks, a tiny galley kitchen, and enough room to not feel completely cramped. The girl stood in the middle of the cabin, looking around like she'd never seen a human ship before. Maybe she hadn't. "Sit," Jake said, pointing to one of the bunks. I'll heat up something better than that protein bar. While the ration pack warmed in the cooker, Jake watched her from the corner of his eye. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, back straight. That wasn't how scared kids usually acted. Scared kids fidgeted. They hunched over. They made themselves small. This girl sat like she'd been trained to sit. Like someone had taught her posture and manners. The cooker beeped. Jake pulled out the steaming pack of rice and vegetables and handed it to her with a fork. Careful. It's hot. She took it carefully, whispered something that might have been thanks in her own language and began eating slowly. Properly. Like she was at a fancy dinner instead of a cargo hauler. Jake pulled up his datapad and found the photos he always kept close. His daughter smiled out from the screen, gap-toothed and happy from her 10th birthday party 3 months ago. That's my girl, Jake said, turning the screen so the Valerian child could see. Her name's Lily. She's about your age. The girl's expression changed. Something in her face softened, became less afraid. She understood what he was showing her. He was a father. That meant something. I'm Jake, he said. Jake Mitchell. What's your name? Kira, she whispered. Her voice was small and rough, like she hadn't used it much lately. Jake knew she was lying. He'd hauled enough cargo and met enough people to know when someone was giving him a fake name. But he didn't push. Whatever she was running from had scared her enough. She could tell him the truth when she was ready. Okay, Kira, he said. You can sleep in that bunk there. I'll be up in the cockpit if you need anything. We'll figure everything out in the morning. Deal? She nodded again and finished her food. Jake climbed up to the cockpit and settled into the pilot's seat. Through the viewport, he could see the station's internal docking bay, lit by harsh industrial lights. Everything looked normal out there. No security rushing around. No alerts. Maybe this would be fine. He'd help the kid find her people tomorrow and be back on course by afternoon. His scanner beeped. 3 large contacts had just entered the system. Military-grade signatures. Valerian warships. Jake's stomach dropped as he read the sensor data. Those weren't trade vessels or patrol craft. Those were Imperial warships, the kind that could turn his little freighter into atoms without breaking formation. He looked back toward the cabin where Kira was curling up in the bunk, finally starting to relax. What had he just brought onto his ship? The proximity alarm screamed through the rusty dawn at 4 in the morning, station time. Jake bolted upright in the pilot's chair where he'd fallen asleep, his heart hammering against his ribs. His hands flew to the scanner display, and what he saw made his blood turn to ice water. 3 contacts. Massive ones. The kind that showed up on scanners like small moons. Valerian Imperial warships. Each one was easily 100 times the size of his little freighter. The kind of ships that carried enough firepower to level a city. The kind that didn't show up unless something serious was happening. Jake's mind raced. This couldn't be coincidence. Not here. Not now. Behind him, he heard movement in the crew cabin. Kira appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Then she saw his face. Saw the scanner. Her scales went from that soft blue to almost white in seconds. She knew what those ships meant. The communication system crackled to life. A cold, precise voice filled the cockpit, speaking in perfect galactic standard. Attention all vessels currently docked at Station Kepler. This is Imperial Commander Drake of the Valerian Defense Fleet. We are conducting a priority search operation. All ships will submit to scanning and possible boarding. Jake's hands were already moving, pulling up his ship's registration, his cargo manifest, anything that might help. But then the voice continued. We are searching for Princess Lyra, 7th daughter of Emperor Victor. She was abducted from her diplomatic escort 2 days ago. The princess is 8 standard years old, approximately 1 meter tall, with blue-tinted scales. Any information leading to her safe return will be rewarded with 1 million credits. The voice went harder, colder. Any person found harboring the princess or interfering with this search will be considered an enemy of the Valerian Empire. This is an act of war. We will show no mercy. Jake slowly turned to look at the small girl standing in his doorway. Not Kira. Lyra. Princess Lyra. An emperor's daughter was standing on his cargo hauler, wearing his spare sleep shirt, looking at him with those terrified eyes. His mouth went dry. His hands started shaking. In 15 years of running cargo, he'd broken plenty of small rules. Fudged some paperwork. Maybe looked the other way when someone paid extra not to ask questions about their cargo. But this? This was so far beyond anything he'd ever done. They'll kill you, Lyra whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the hum of the ship's systems. You should just give me back. Tell them you found me. Take the reward. Jake stared at her. 1,000,000 credits. That was enough money to never work again. Enough to send his daughter to the best schools in the system. Enough to retire, buy a house on a nice planet somewhere, live easy for the rest of his life. All he had to do was hand over one scared little girl. Is that what you want? He asked. Lyra's scales rippled with emotion. She shook her head and tears started rolling down her face. No. But I don't want them to hurt you either. You've been kind to me. No one's been kind to me in so long. Jake ran both hands through his hair, pacing the tiny cockpit. His mind was spinning. Every law in the galaxy told him to hand her over. She was royalty. She had a family. An empire. Guards and servants and everything a kid could want. But he thought about his own daughter back home. About Lily with her bright smile and her love of old Earth cartoons. What would he want if she was the one who was scared and running? What would he want some stranger to do if they found her hiding and afraid? The answer was simple. He'd want them to keep her safe. No matter what. The communication system chimed again. All vessels have 5 minutes to respond with crew manifests and prepare for boarding scans. Failure to comply will result in immediate seizure of your vessel. 5 minutes. Jake made a decision that would change his life forever. Get in the cargo locker, he snapped, already moving. The one in the back with all the spare parts. Get in there and don't make a single sound. I don't care what you hear. Don't move. Don't breathe loud. Nothing. Understand? Lyra nodded and ran. Jake heard the locker door click shut. Then he went to work. His ship was old. Ancient by modern standards. That meant the systems were clunky, inefficient, and prone to breaking down. But right now, those weaknesses were about to become his greatest advantage. Jake pulled open the environmental control panel and started yanking circuits. The life support system sputtered and died. Warning lights blazed red across every console. The temperature started dropping immediately. He grabbed a wrench and punctured the coolant line, letting the bright blue fluid spray across the floor and soak into his clothes. Alarms were screaming now. The ship's computer was having a fit, warning him about imminent system failure. Perfect. Jake transmitted his manifest. 1 crew member. 1 human. Jake Mitchell. Cargo hauler. Nothing suspicious. Just another struggling independent freighter trying to make a living in the outer systems. Then he sent a distress signal. This is the Rusty Dawn, Dock 17. I've got major systems failure. Life support is down. Coolant leak in the main cabin. Requesting emergency assistance. His hands were steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by cold focus. He'd been a soldier once, back before the cargo hauling. Back when he was younger and dumber and thought he could make a difference. That training was coming back now. The scanner showed one of the warships moving closer. They were going to board him. Had to. A ship in distress was the perfect cover for someone trying to hide. Jake's old ship had one advantage those modern Valerian vessels didn't count on. The hull shielding was so outdated, so full of random metal patches and jury-rigged repairs, that it scattered sensor beams like a mirror ball. Biosigns got lost in the noise. Anyone scanning from outside would have trouble getting a clear reading. The communication screen flickered to life. A Valerian officer appeared, all sharp angles and cold efficiency. His scales were a deep purple, marking him as military caste. Behind him, Jake could see the pristine interior of the warship, all gleaming metal and perfect order. Captain Mitchell. Stand by for boarding. Look, I've got a real situation here, Jake said, and he didn't have to fake the panic in his voice. The coolant system just blew. I'm losing atmosphere. Can you guys help me out? I've got maybe an hour before this whole ship is frozen solid. The officer's eyes narrowed. Submit to scan first. Jake nodded frantically, already knowing what would happen. The Valerian ship's scanners swept over the Rusty Dawn. The readings came back scrambled, unclear. 1 human life sign. Maybe. Hard to tell with all that interference from the damaged systems and old shielding. Your vessel is poorly maintained, the officer said with obvious disgust. Yeah, well, some of us can't afford Imperial-grade ships, Jake shot back, letting frustration creep into his voice. Playing the part of the annoyed, stressed-out freighter captain. You gonna help me fix this or just insult my ride? He could see the calculation happening behind the officer's eyes. 1 human. Small freighter. Systems actually failing. Nothing suspicious except bad luck and worse maintenance. The Valerian leaned back. Repair your systems, Captain. If you need parts, requisition them from station supply. Don't attempt to leave dock until your vessel is certified safe. Yeah, sure thing. The screen went dark. Jake stood perfectly still for a full minute, watching the scanner. The warship held position for another 5 minutes that felt like 5 years. Then, finally, it moved away, heading to the next ship in line, continuing the search. When the warship finally cleared scanner range and moved to the far side of the station, Jake's legs gave out. He collapsed into the pilot's chair, his whole body shaking. Cold sweat dripped down his back despite the freezing temperature in the cabin. He'd just lied to an Imperial warship. Just hidden a princess from an emperor. Just made himself an enemy of one of the most powerful civilizations in known space. "You can come out," he called. The cargo locker clicked open. Lyra emerged slowly, her eyes wide and wet with tears. She looked at Jake like he was something she couldn't quite understand. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you risk that? They could have killed you. They still might kill you when they find out." Jake pulled up his datapad with shaking hands. Found the photo of his daughter. Showed it to Lyra again. "Her name's Lily," he said. "She's 9 years old. Loves Earth music. Terrible at math. Best kid in the whole galaxy." He looked at Lyra. "Someone would do it for her. I hope to God someone would do it for her if she needed help. That's all the reason I need." Lyra's tears came harder now. She crossed the cabin and hugged him tight. Jake awkwardly patted her back, feeling completely out of his depth. Outside, 2 more warships were joining the search. The station was crawling with Valerian military now. They weren't leaving anytime soon. And Jake had just painted a target on his back that would follow him across the galaxy. But when he looked down at the scared little girl holding on to him like he was the only safe thing in her universe, he knew he'd make the same choice again. Even if it killed him. Jake managed to slip the Rusty Dawn away from Station Kepler 6 hours later, using the confusion of a bulk freighter departure as cover. His ship limped along on minimum power, trying to look like just another piece of space junk drifting between systems. Every few minutes he checked the scanner, watching for those telltale massive signatures that meant Valerian warships. They had maybe 12 hours before the Imperial fleet widened their search pattern. Maybe less if they got lucky with their grid work. Lyra sat in the co-pilot seat, her small frame barely filling half the chair. She'd been quiet since they left the station, just staring out at the stars sliding past. Jake had given her one of his old flight jackets to wear. It hung on her like a tent, but at least it was warm. Jake ran calculations on his NAV computer, plotting possible routes. They needed to get far away fast, but his ship wasn't built for speed. He glanced over at the girl. "Tell me something," he said quietly. "Why did you run?" Lyra was silent for a long moment. Then the words started coming out, slow at first, then faster like a dam breaking. "My father arranged a marriage," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "To General Drake. He's the commander of the Northern Fleet. He's important. Powerful. My father needed his support for some political thing I don't really understand." Jake's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet, letting her talk. "Drake is old," Lyra continued. "Like really old. Older than my grandfather was. He's been married 4 times before. His last wife disappeared, and nobody talks about what happened to her." Her scales rippled with emotion. "And he's mean. I could see it in his eyes when he came to the palace. The way he looked at me wasn't like looking at a person. It was like I was a thing he was buying." "How old are you?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "8. I'm 8 years old." Lyra's voice cracked. "And nobody asked me if I wanted this. My father just told me it was decided. That it was my duty to the Empire. That I should be honored." She turned to look at Jake, tears streaming down her face. "I just wanted to choose my own life. Is that so terrible? I don't want to be married to some old general who scares me. I want to study. I want to learn about other worlds. I want to pick who I spend my life with when I'm ready, not when I'm 8 years old." Jake felt something crack inside his chest. He thought about his daughter back home, safe and free to be a kid. Free to make mistakes and have dreams and grow up at her own pace. The idea of someone forcing her into marriage at 8 years old made him physically sick. "The Valerian Empire is supposed to be advanced," Jake said, his voice hard. "You've got ships that make mine look like a tin can. Technology humans can barely understand. But you still treat kids like property?" "It's tradition," Lyra said quietly. "That's what they always say. It's how things have always been done." "Humans had traditions like that too once," Jake said. "A long time ago. We fought wars to end them. A lot of people died so kids could be kids and not bargaining chips." He pulled up his communication array and started scrolling through encrypted channels. Frequencies that weren't supposed to exist. Contact lists that would get him arrested just for having them. "What are you doing?" Lyra asked. "Calling in a favor," Jake said. "There's a network. Humans call it the Underground Railroad after something from our history. People who help folks escape from bad situations. It's illegal. Dangerous. Government pretends it doesn't exist. His fingers moved across the controls, sending out a coded message. But it's exactly what you need. The response came back faster than he expected. Coordinates. A safe house in the Terran expanse. Instructions for a new identity. People who could help a princess disappear and become just another kid with a chance at a normal life. Jake was just starting to feel like maybe this could work when every news feed in 3 sectors lit up at once. The face that appeared on his view screen made Jake's blood freeze. Emperor Victor himself. Not some spokesman or military commander. The Emperor. His scales were deep red, almost black, marking him as pure royal bloodline. His eyes were cold and ancient. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. To all citizens of the galaxy. My daughter, Princess Lyra, has been kidnapped by a human criminal named Jake Mitchell. This man is extremely dangerous. The bounty for information leading to his capture is now 10 million credits. Dead or alive. Jake's hands went numb. Furthermore, the Emperor continued, if Jake Mitchell is not delivered to Valerian custody within 48 hours, the Valerian Empire will sever all diplomatic and trade relations with the Human Confederation. All treaties will be void. All human vessels will be barred from Valerian space. The transmission cut to footage of Jake's ship leaving Station Kepler. They had him on camera. His face was everywhere now. Every bounty hunter, every desperate person who needed money, every government agent, they'd all be looking for him. Then came the final blow. The Human Confederation's official response scrolled across the bottom of the screen. They'd issued a warrant for Jake's arrest. His own species. His own government. They were hanging him out to dry to keep the peace with the Valorians. Jake felt the weight of the entire galaxy pressing down on him. 3 sectors worth of people, all hunting for one small cargo hauler. I'm so sorry, Lyra whispered. She was crying again, her small body shaking. This is all my fault. You should just leave me somewhere. Drop me on a station. Tell them you found me. Take the money. Save yourself. Jake looked at this 8-year-old girl who'd been born into a life of privilege but just wanted the simple freedom to choose her own path. He thought about his daughter growing up in a universe where the powerful could still trade children like commodities, where being born royal or important meant you had less freedom than the poorest kid on Earth. He thought about what kind of man he wanted to be, what kind of example he wanted to set. Kid, Jake said, his hands already adjusting their course toward the Terran expanse, humans have a saying. We don't leave anyone behind. Not when they need us. Not ever. But they'll kill you, Lyra said. Or put you in prison forever. Your daughter will grow up without a father because of me. My daughter will grow up knowing her dad did the right thing, Jake said. That matters more than playing it safe. His scanner beeped. 3 more Valerian warships had just entered the sector, spreading out in a search pattern. They were tightening the net. Jake plotted a course through an asteroid field that would scramble their sensors. It was dangerous flying, but the Rusty Dawn was small enough and nimble enough to handle it. Those big Imperial ships would have to go around, buying him time. Hold on, he told Lyra. This is gonna get rough. As he guided his ship into the asteroid field, dodging rocks the size of buildings, Jake thought about what he'd gotten himself into. An 8-year-old princess. An emperor's wrath. The most powerful empire in known space hunting him. His own government wanting him arrested. Bounty hunters from a dozen species looking to collect 10 million credits. Any sane person would surrender. Would hand over the girl and beg for mercy. But Jake had been a soldier once. He'd fought in the border wars where humans earned their reputation as the species you didn't want to back into a corner. The species that would bite and claw and fight dirty when everything was on the line. The Valorians had technology. They had numbers. They had power. But humans had something else. Something that had carried them from one small planet to the stars. Something that made them dangerous when everyone counted them out. Humans were stubborn. And when you backed them into a corner with no way out, when you threatened something they decided to protect, they didn't surrender. They fought. And they fought dirty. Jake Mitchell was about to remind the galaxy why messing with humans was a bad idea. Even if it killed him. Especially if it killed him. Because some things were worth dying for. And an 8-year-old girl's freedom to choose her own life was one of them. The Terran expanse wasn't on any official map. It existed in the gaps between sectors, in the places where government authority faded into static. Out here the rules changed. Pirates ran trade routes. Smugglers moved cargo nobody asked questions about. And people who didn't fit anywhere else carved out their own version of civilization. Jake's hauler limped into the region on fumes, both literally and figuratively. His fuel reserves were nearly dry, and the ship's engines were making sounds that no engine should ever make. He'd pushed the Rusty Dawn harder than she was built for, and she was letting him know about it. Haven Station appeared on his scanner like a ghost. One moment empty space, the next moment a massive asteroid base hanging in the darkness. Clever positioning and some serious stealth technology kept it hidden from anyone who didn't know exactly where to look. Jake transmitted the recognition code he'd been given. A burst of static, then a woman's voice came through his speakers. "Rusty Dawn, this is Haven Dock Control. We've been expecting you. Bay 7 is open. Come on in." The docking master met them at the airlock. She was maybe 40, with short gray hair and mechanical arms that whirred softly when she moved. Her name tag said Rachel. Her eyes said she'd seen things that would give most people nightmares and had stopped caring a long time ago. She took one look at Jake and Lyra and asked simply, "Underground Railroad?" Jake nodded, too tired to explain. Rachel's hard expression softened when she really looked at Lyra. She knelt down so she was at eye level with the girl. "Hey there, small one. You're safe here. Nobody gets to you without going through all of us first. Understand?" Lyra nodded, her scales shifting through colors Jake was starting to recognize as emotions. Right now they showed cautious hope. "Third corridor, blue door," Rachel said, standing. "Margaret's waiting for you. She'll set you up." The inside of Haven Station was nothing like the sterile, controlled environments of official human stations. This place was alive. Messy. Real. Corridors painted in wild colors. Music drifting from open doorways. The smell of food from a dozen different worlds mixing together. People of various species moving around, talking, laughing, living. But every screen they passed showed the same thing. Emperor Victor's face, purple with rage. The bounty on Jake's head had doubled to 20 million credits. The Valerian Imperial fleet was mobilizing their full strength. 300 warships, all hunting for one small freighter and the princess inside it. The Human Confederation was in full panic mode. Jake watched news feeds showing their parliament in emergency session. Some representatives demanded Jake be handed over immediately to preserve peace. Others argued that would make humanity look weak. The debate was getting heated. Then something strange started happening. Something nobody expected. Social media across a dozen worlds began exploding with activity. Young Valorians were posting videos, messages, stories. At first it was just a few, then dozens, then thousands. They were talking about their own arranged marriages. Sharing their own stories of being traded like property to secure alliances and maintain tradition. One video showed a teenage Valerian girl crying as she talked about being engaged to someone she'd never met. Another showed a young man describing how he'd been married off at 10 years old to a family he'd never seen before. The stories kept coming, flooding the networks faster than anyone could track them. Other species joined in. Krellian youth shared their experiences. The Sien children spoke out. Even some humans added their voices, talking about communities where old practices still held on in the shadows. What Jake had done, hiding one scared 8-year-old girl, had somehow lit a match to decades of resentment and pain. Lyra's disappearance had become a symbol for everyone who'd ever been told their lives weren't their own to choose. A man found them in the corridor. Tall, weathered, with a captain's jacket that had seen better days and a smile that said trouble was his business. His name tag said Derek. "You're famous, Mitchell," he said, falling into step beside them. "Like, seriously famous. Half the galaxy wants you dead. The other half wants to buy you a drink and shake your hand." "Great," Jake muttered. "Always wanted to be famous." Derek laughed. "The bounty hunters are mostly staying clear of Haven, but that won't last. You've got maybe a day before some of the desperate ones start making moves. 20 million credits makes people brave and stupid." They reached the blue door. Inside, a small office was packed with communications equipment, document forgers, and a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and hands that never stopped moving. Margaret, the coordinator for this branch of the Underground Railroad. She had everything ready. New identity papers for Lyra. Passage on a ship leaving tomorrow for the outer colonies. A family willing to take in a Valerian child, no questions asked. Everything Jake had risked his life and freedom for, all arranged within hours. But Lyra wasn't looking at the papers. She was staring at the screens showing the protests growing on Valerian worlds. Thousands of young people gathering in the capital city. Holding signs. Chanting. Demanding change. "This is wrong," Lyra said quietly. Her voice was small but steady. "People could get hurt because of me. That girl in the video is going to be in trouble for speaking out. All of them are." People are standing up because of you, Jake said, kneeling beside her. There's a difference. You showed them they're not alone. Sometimes that's all it takes. Lyra looked at him with those triple-pupiled eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. Then she looked at the papers Margaret had prepared. The new identity. The new life. The freedom she'd risked everything for. Then she looked back at the screens showing her people marching in the streets. I want to go home, Lyra said. The room went silent. Margaret stopped typing. Derek stopped moving. Jake felt his heart drop into his stomach. Kid, Jake said carefully, if you go back they'll marry you off to that general. Everything we've done. But on my terms, Lyra interrupted. Her scales were shifting to colors Jake had never seen before. Determination. Courage. I'll go back, but I'm going to speak first. I'm going to tell everyone why I ran. I'm going to stand in front of my father and the whole empire and say that what they're doing is wrong. They'll never let you speak, Margaret said gently. They'll just take you back in. Not if I broadcast it first, Lyra said. She pointed to the communications equipment filling the office. You have equipment here that can reach Valerian networks, right? That's how the railroad contacts people. Margaret nodded slowly. Then I can use it to broadcast a message before I go back. Tell the whole empire why I ran. What my father planned to do to me. Let everyone see the truth before he can cover it up. Jake stared at this 8-year-old princess who'd been terrified and broken just days ago. Now she stood straight, speaking with the kind of certainty that moved worlds. Kid, they could execute me for this, Jake said. Your father isn't going to forget what I did. Not if I make it clear you saved me, Lyra said. Not if I tell them you were the only one who treated me like a person instead of property. Not if thousands of my people are watching and demanding change. Derek let out a low whistle. She's got guts. I'll give her that. Margaret looked at Jake. It's risky. Really risky. But it might actually work. Public pressure is powerful even on emperors. Especially when your own people are the ones applying it. Jake thought about his daughter back home. About the kind of galaxy he wanted her to grow up in. About whether protecting one child meant hiding her away or helping her find her voice to change everything. You're sure about this? He asked Lyra. She nodded. You taught me something. You showed me that sometimes one person standing up for what's right can change everything. Even when the whole universe is against them. Even when it's dangerous. Her scales shimmered with absolute certainty. It's time I did the same. Jake looked at this 8-year-old girl about to challenge the most powerful man in the Valerian Empire. About to stand up in front of billions and demand they change centuries of tradition. It was the most human thing she could possibly do. And she'd learned it from him. All right, Jake said. Let's make some noise. Margaret was already pulling up broadcast equipment. Derek was grinning like someone had just suggested the craziest, most dangerous bar fight in history. And somewhere in Valerian space, an emperor was about to learn that you couldn't silence someone whose voice the entire galaxy was waiting to hear. Haven Station's main communication array was built from salvaged military hardware and illegal broadcasting equipment that 3 different governments would love to destroy. It could punch a signal through jamming, past security nets, and directly into the homes of anyone with a screen. Margaret had used it dozens of times to help refugees coordinate escapes or send messages to families they'd left behind. She'd never used it to let an 8-year-old princess challenge an emperor in front of the entire galaxy. This is insane, Derek muttered, watching Margaret work the controls. Absolutely certifiably insane. Yep, Jake agreed. His hands were shaking. This was either going to work or get them all killed in the next hour. Rachel from the docking bay had joined them, along with about 20 other Haven residents who'd heard what was happening. Word traveled fast on a station this size. Now the small office was packed with humans who'd all run from something, who'd all chosen freedom over safety at some point in their lives. They all understood what Lyra was about to do. Margaret finished her setup and turned to Lyra. Once I activate this, every major network in Valerian space will pick up your signal. News feeds, government channels, even the Emperor's private communications. You'll have maybe 2 minutes before they can block it. Make it count, princess. Lyra nodded. She looked tiny standing in front of the camera, still wearing Jake's oversized flight jacket. But her scales had shifted to a color Jake had learned meant determination. She was scared, he could see it in her eyes, but she was doing it anyway. Margaret counted down with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. The broadcast went live. Within seconds, screens across 3 sectors flickered and switched to the same image. Princess Lyra, standing in what was obviously a human smuggler's station, very much alive. The shock wave of that alone would have been enough to make news for weeks. But Lyra wasn't done. "People of the Valerian Empire," she began, her voice steady despite her age. "My name is Princess Lyra, seventh daughter of Emperor Victor. I am 8 years old. And I ran away from home because my father was going to force me to marry General Drake to secure a military alliance." Jake watched the feeds on the side monitors. Every major Valerian news network had picked up the signal. Emergency broadcasts were interrupting regular programming. And in the Imperial Palace he could see the chaos erupting. Emperor Victor's face appeared in a split-screen feed, someone from the palace having patched him through. He looked like he'd been hit by a transport shuttle. Shock and rage warred across his features. "Lyra, you will cease this transmission immediately," he began. "No, father, I won't," Lyra interrupted. Jake had never been more proud of anyone in his life. "I need to say this. Everyone needs to hear it." She turned back to the main camera. "I know my father needs General Drake's support. I know arranged marriages are tradition in our empire. I know I was born into a life of duty and service." Her voice grew stronger. "But I'm 8 years old. I'm a child. And I should have the right to choose who I spend my life with when I'm old enough to make that choice. Not when I'm too young to understand what marriage even means." The monitors showed the crowds gathering on Valerian worlds. The protests that had started small were growing by the second. Thousands of young Valorians flooding into the streets, watching Lyra's broadcast on their personal devices, adding their voices to hers. "Look at your screens, father," Lyra said. "Look at our people. They're protesting because they're tired of this. Tired of children being traded like cargo. Tired of tradition mattering more than the lives of the young." Jake glanced at the crowd count scrolling across one monitor. 50,000 in the capital city. 100,000. 200,000 and climbing. Emperor Victor's advisors were visible now, crowding around him, whispering frantically. Military officers. Political counselors. All of them looking panicked as they watched centuries of tradition crumbling in real time. "I'll come home," Lyra said, her voice clear and certain. "I'll return to the palace. I'll face whatever punishment you think I deserve. But only if you promise, publicly, right now, where everyone can witness it, to end arranged marriages for children. No more political bargaining with young lives. No more trading 8-year-olds to secure alliances." The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. "If you refuse," Lyra continued, "I'll renounce my royal title here and now. I'll claim asylum with humanity. And I'll spend the rest of my life telling anyone who will listen about what the Valerian Empire does to its own children." The silence that followed was deafening. Jake watched Emperor Victor's face. The Emperor's scales had gone almost black with emotion. Rage. Humiliation. But also something else. Something that might have been respect for his daughter's courage, even if he'd never admit it. The crowd counts kept climbing. 500,000 now. Spreading to other Valerian worlds. Other species joining in, their own young people adding their voices. What Lyra had started was becoming something bigger than any of them had imagined. "You would shame your family?" Emperor Victor asked finally, his voice cold as ice. "You would disgrace your bloodline for this?" "I would honor children," Lyra replied without hesitation. "The way Jake Mitchell honored me when he found me scared and alone. The way humans honor their young, by protecting them, not trading them. By letting them be children before forcing them to be tools of politics." She stepped closer to the camera. "You raised me to serve the Empire, father. This is how I choose to serve it. By making it better. By making sure no other child has to run away to have a childhood." More silence. Longer this time. Jake could see the calculation happening behind the Emperor's eyes. Could see him weighing his options. His pride against his empire. His authority against the will of millions of his own people watching and waiting. The military advisors were practically shouting now, though the audio was muted. But Jake could read body language well enough. They were telling the Emperor he had no choice. The protests were too big. The momentum too strong. Fighting this would tear the Empire apart. Finally, Emperor Victor spoke. His voice was tight, controlled, barely containing the storm beneath it. "The Valerian Empire acknowledges that some traditions must evolve with time. A council will be formed to review marriage customs and age restrictions. Young voices, including those of my daughter, will be heard. Changes will be made." It wasn't everything Lyra had asked for. But it was more than Jake had dared hope for. Lyra bowed slightly, formal and proper despite standing in a smuggler's den. "Thank you, father. I'll come home now." The transmission cut. Margaret shut down the equipment before anyone could trace the signal back and cause problems for Haven Station. For a long moment, nobody in the crowded office moved or spoke. Then Rachel started clapping. Slowly at first, then faster. The other residents joined in. Soon the entire room was applauding this 8-year-old girl who just changed an empire. Lyra turned to Jake and suddenly she wasn't a princess anymore. She was just a scared kid who'd done something incredibly brave and was only now realizing how huge it had been. She ran to him and hugged him tight, shaking. "You did good, kid," Jake said softly. "You did really good." 3 Valerian ships arrived at Haven Station 6 hours later. Not warships this time. Diplomatic vessels. They transmitted a formal request for Princess Lyra's return and offered Jake Mitchell full immunity in writing. No charges. No arrest. Free passage back to human space. As Lyra prepared to leave, she found Jake on the docking platform. Her royal escort waited at a respectful distance, giving them a moment. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. For treating me like a person when everyone else treated me like property. For risking everything when you didn't have to. For showing me that one person can make a difference." Jake knelt down to her level. "You did the hard part. I just kept you safe long enough to find your voice. That's what humans do though, isn't it?" Lyra said. "You protect people who need it. You stand up for what's right even when it's dangerous. You fight for the ones who can't fight for themselves." She hugged him one more time. "I won't forget the human way." Jake watched her walk to the diplomatic ship, surrounded by guards and officials who would take her back to a palace and a life he couldn't imagine. But she walked different now. Head high. Scales bright. Not a scared runaway anymore, but someone who'd found her strength. The charges against Jake were quietly dropped. The bounty disappeared. The Human Confederation issued a formal statement about respecting diplomatic situations and protecting refugees. Politicians took credit. Bureaucrats wrote reports. The official version of events made everyone look good. But the people who mattered knew the truth. Jake Mitchell, cargo hauler and single dad, had hidden a princess because it was the right thing to do. And in doing so, he'd helped start a movement that would change multiple empires. Jake returned to the Rusty Dawn and pointed her toward Earth. Toward home. Toward his daughter who was waiting. He thought about Lyra and all the other kids across the galaxy who would grow up with a little more freedom because one 8-year-old found the courage to speak up. He thought about the protests still growing on Valerian worlds. About the council being formed to review marriage laws. About young voices finally being heard. It wasn't perfect. Change never happened all at once. But it was a start. All because a human dad saw a scared kid and couldn't walk away. Because sometimes the most important thing you can do is stand up for someone who needs it, even when the whole universe tells you to mind your own business. That was the human way. Stubborn. Protective. Willing to fight dirty when it mattered. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.